Gul is in, so it's awesome. And she's an actor, she's a model, she's an activist, an aviator, a politician, entrepreneur, and an adrenaline junkie. Miss India 1999, and she will talk about the future of business. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our own Chandigarh ka latki, Gul Panag.
Good afternoon, everyone. And after that last session from Grishma, we between Shekhar Gupta next and the awards evening. It's great to have you here, Gul, and welcome.
Thank you, Lloyd.
I know this is like hometown for you. It feels like being home. Just to get things started, I think what's fascinated a lot of people is the seamless transition that you've made from beauty pageant winner to Bollywood, movies, a businesswoman, an activist, a politician as well. And I think with a room full of corporate communications professionals and PR people, I think everyone wants to understand what's that consistent thread, what's that theme that's let you be who you are, which is really the person that you are as opposed to tilting at the windmills and doing different things. So that'll be a fascinating story.
That's a very loaded question, Lloyd, and thank you for that. It's going to have a rather long answer. I hope the ladies and the gentlemen in the room are going to give me the benefit of their patience. Well, to start with, I think I haven't transitioned. This is who I am, this is who I've always been, but like every individual, there's been an element of growth. And I think when you tie growth with goals you set for yourself, that by default results in what others see as a transition, others see as an evolution, because there comes a time in life, and for some people it comes early, when all your primary needs are taken care of. Typically we all work for roti, kapda, makan. Different kinds of roti, different kinds of kapda, and different kinds of makan. But ultimately we're all working to make a living. I was fortunate that goal, so to speak, was something that I achieved very young in life at 20. What then? And I think the one person who constantly conditioned me to be a goal setter was my father. So he says, what next? I was like, what do you mean, what next? I'm Miss India. Like 3 days later, his first question to me is, what next? So I think for me, the single big influence, Lloyd, was my father constantly asking me, what's your next goal? And somewhere along the first maybe year or so of being, standing on my own feet, I began writing goals down. And I was conditioned to not have one goal, because he would always tell me, after one goal, there has to be another goal. And after that goal, there has to be another goal. So my personal growth was always goal-driven. Everything else was incidental. And because so many things happened in the course of the goals I set for myself, many things became platforms and enablers of other things by default. But I remained true to myself, and as I look back, I think the only things that have ever worked for me are being honest, being forthright, and being the most authentic version of myself. And luckily for me, I fall quite flat on my face when I try and be unauthentic. So for me, there is a inbuilt self-correcting formulation that exists in my DNA, that things just don't seem to work if I'm not being the most authentic version of myself.
Fantastic. I think that's a great takeaway for businesses and brands. I think today increasingly brands and businesses are being called upon to be authentic and to be real, not to be, kind of being something for everyone. And the idea is to stand for something and stay with it. And I really think that resonates, and that's brilliant. In the course of having the privilege to sit in a kind of fireside chat with you, I was doing some research, and I think long before the personality emerged of this great person, I just like the fact that the question that got you the Miss India crown was pretty interesting. I was doing some background research, and this was the time of the famous Monica Lewinsky scandal. And one of the jury members, who I shall not name, shot the question in times when Miss Indias were used to, putting those standard ones about Mother Teresa and the rest of it, saying that if you were Chelsea Clinton, what would you tell your parents? I'd love you to repeat that because that's a great piece of advice.
Well, incidentally, this was a common question for the girls who made it to the top 5. And pretty much everybody was going to give the same answer, which is, my answer was, and I want to qualify the answer before I give it. The moment that question was asked, firstly, I was stumped because I had thought about the Monica Lewinsky affair from every angle except Chelsea's angle. From Hillary's angle, from Bill's angle, from Monica's angle. But somehow Chelsea, who was probably just about, we were probably contemporaries as far as age is concerned. I just hadn't thought about it. It hadn't entered my mind. And then the second thing that I quickly realized, we were supposed to write our answers on a piece of paper so that when you read them out, you don't deviate from what you've written, because we all asked a common question. And then I very quickly realized that it wasn't going to be what I said, but how I said it that was going to make me win. So, and I said, if I were Chelsea Clinton, the only advice I would give my parents is to stick together, because at the end of the day, the family is the most important unit in society. And that is an answer I would repeat today, 23 years later. It remains, and again, pretty much the other 4 girls said somewhat similar things. But I also realized very early on that I was a good communicator. And I knew in that moment I had to draw on every single speaking experience of mine, both public and private, to make sure I said what they would be saying differently. So that really was that answer.
Thank you for sharing that. Excellent. I'm going back to the thing that you said earlier, which was, your dad's constant quest for saying, redraw your goals, what next? And in a sense, how that's helped you kind of be multifaceted. You've not just stayed past that beauty thing, which is, beauty without a purpose, so to speak. I think you've gone well beyond that. I think a key question, therefore, is how do you redraw that? Because our best laid plans often go haywire, right? Brands, businesses, we all lay down these big plans. When you look at the world in 2019, I think all of us made great plans, and then the pandemic happened, right? And just when you think everything is going okay and the business is picking up, and then the Ukraine-Russia war happens. So as they say, and I can't use that 4-letter word, it happens in life, right? So how do you redraft and redraw your agendas, when things don't go to plan, right? The things you've loved to have done, which possibly haven't worked out the way they did. So how do you rework that?
There's a very simple philosophy, and the answer is an acronym, OODA: observe, orient, decide, and act. It is a military strategy that has been used for times immemorial. And it's now a common part of management and communication jargon. Observe what's happening around you. Orient yourself. So there's no, something has happened, too bad, so sad. It's happened. You can't fight what's happened. Orient. Okay, this has happened, now what do I do? Decide and act. And the thing is, again, obviously a very, very strong influence in my life has been my father, continues to be my father. And this is something, at the risk of repeating myself, military strategy has relied upon since the history of warfare, 2,000 odd years ago. But it's not just limited to warfare. In every scenario in life, you've got to be doing OODA cycles. I need to be doing an OODA cycle to see whether people at the back are interested in what I'm saying or not. Whether what I'm saying to Lloyd right now is getting through to him. Or maybe I'm digressing and going off on a tangent. I need to, at every step of this communication, for example, be doing an OODA cycle. Suppose I have a meeting with a potential client / director / investor. I may go with a certain plan. The plan may go awry. Can I stick to that plan? No, I can't. I must quickly observe that what I'm saying, what I'm doing is not working. And then orient myself to what is the fallout of what I didn't do right. Or again, there's no right and wrong, but everybody's perspective is different. And then immediately decide and then act. Another way of looking at it is I also see observe, orient as acceptance. the more you fight what has happened, the less you can recalibrate. So one of the things I learned during flying school, again, flying was a bucket list item which people see as bucket list, but for me was a personal life goal. I have a lot of goals written down, but the ecosystem that I have around me, which includes my husband, which includes my father, we're all goal-oriented people. We've always been goal-oriented. Again, that probably comes from being armed forces, families, both sides. And, this was something I spoke about very often. And, in my immediate circle, Miss India was something I'd been talking about since I was maybe 5 or 6. And my father would encourage me instead of dreaming about it, convert it into a goal and work towards it. Similarly, when I was in college in Patiala, long story why I ended up there, but the short of it is I was in Patiala, miserable because I thought I'd be in Stevens, or actually better still, I thought I'd be in University of Pennsylvania. But a twist of fate brought me to Patiala, and I would ride to college every day. And I would see the flying club where a lot of people in the north did their flying. Most people who fly out of Delhi today have done their flying from the Patiala Flying Club. And I would see these yellow pushpucks and yellow Cessnas, and I'd be like, I want to fly. But I was very clear it wasn't the only thing I wanted to do. So talking about how that converted into a goal and, looping it back to the UDA cycle. I would speak about, I want to fly, and Rishi, then my boyfriend, was like, so what's stopping you? Make it happen. Make a plan. You have the resources to make it happen. Work at it. So what I'm going to say here is accepting the reality of what has happened helps you stop fighting it. And the moment you stop fighting it, you can recalibrate, which is the core of what they teach you in flying school. Things are going to go wrong. You have memory items and you have reference items. Memory items are things you must remember when an emergency strikes. Non-memory items mean that you have enough altitude, you can pull out the quick reference handbook and say, okay, this has happened, what do I do? And that's typically how things happen. All cockpits have QRHs that are close by. You read them and say, okay, this is my emergency, how do I fix it? But you've got to first accept that this has happened. And then you say, what am I going to do about it? How am I going to recalibrate? Am I going to make an emergency landing? My radio is broken. What am I going to do? Am I going to do maybe two fly passes to show people that I can't fly? Can they block the traffic in the area so I can make a landing without radio? But you can only do that if you accept what's happened to you. You can't say, oh my God, why is my radio broken? Why has the engine failed? Why? The question why does not have any value effectively in a situation that's already happened. You've got to deal with it and figure out a way around it and recalibrate your approach.
Terrific. I'm going to switch tracks a bit because I think what everyone here is also keen to is that you've done endorsements, right? Most recently in December, as someone just reminded us right outside. And in this quest for staying authentic to who you are and still adding value to the businesses that you associate with, what's the kind of quick checklist that you do when brands approach you for an endorsement? In these days, there are various kinds. There are endorsements where you do commercials for them or you support a cause. So are there anything, what kind of due diligence or what kind of, are you partial to associating with brands that, are part of your lifestyle?
Like I said earlier, I have what I believe a brand identity. Every individual is a brand today. And my pillars of my brand proposition are travel, adventure, cars, bikes, planes, speaking up, thought leadership, and working towards making a difference. If something fits in this universe, I will work with it. Otherwise, I won't. And the campaign that you're referring to was a travel-related campaign. Travel is something that I've always pursued, not as a tourist, but more as a traveler, because it's been a great source of learning for me. So in my universe of travel, adventure, it keeps evolving with time as you grow older. Parenting has become a universe because I like to do parenting the way I see parenting. People seem to find it interesting, but I'm not trying to be interesting. I'm just trying to have fun while, dealing with the fairly arduous task of raising a 4-year-old while also continuing to being a professional. So my universe sort of expands across these 4, 5, 6 verticals. If something fits in that, it will be where I can see a synergy. Fitness, I didn't mention. So if there's synergy, I will do that. So which is why I find it very challenging, with no disrespect meant to any brand, for me to be able to associate with something that is not part of my universe. On one hand, I speak for fitness, I speak for clean eating, clean living, and then maybe I'm associating with junk food. It doesn't sit right, to me personally. And a lot of people may disagree. They're like, oh, you're just doing a job, you're promoting something. But I think, again, as we spoke earlier, an element of authenticity comes in, and more importantly, an element of ethics comes in. Are you being the most authentic and ethical version of yourself? Are you trying to help sell something you don't use? If you're trying to do that, then it's not cool.
Not cool indeed. I think great point, and if I can just context it to the fact that the new age consumer, the Gen Z and the millennials as well, are expecting their celebrities, are expecting their idols, are expecting their brands, are expecting their business to stand for something real and not, just about do anything. And though I think it's taken a while for a lot of our well-known celebrities to actually have a very strong kind of, if I'd call it a moral filter or something well-defined. So I think really, I'd like to compliment you. I think that's great. But taking from one of the things in the hierarchy you mentioned, which is speaking up, and possibly going a little beyond the brand world in these slightly polarizing times.
Slightly.
Got to be politically correct.
Absolutely.
So I would say, why is it that a lot of stars and well-known celebrities desist from speaking out and taking a stand on issues, and very often either going with the prevalent mood or just looking the other way, saying, look, we paid big bucks for the movies we do. It's not our business when something else is happening, right? I don't need to have a point of view about X, Y, Z. How do you feel about that? And why do you think lots of stars are very reticent about, going out there and standing up and being counted?
I think we've seen a generation of movie stars who did speak up. And we saw through the 80s people like Shabana Azmi, whose identities were based on their activism in addition to them being stellar actors. So there were people like her, far and few in between, but they always existed. I think in today's times, there are two factors which perhaps need to be put out there to contextualize why it's becoming challenging for people who are public figures to speak up. The room to be able to air an opinion that doesn't necessarily flow with the majoritarian opinion is shrinking. And for better or worse, only time will tell. But the room to be able to share a contrarian point of view is shrinking. So what do you do about that? You can either stick to your guns and say, you know what, this is what I believe in, I'm going to keep saying this. But if that tends to be suicidal, if your bread and butter begins to get affected by that, are you still going to do that? Ultimately, you're doing what you're doing because you feel you want to be able to speak a particular way, speak up and stand for certain things. Now, in addition to that, there's also, call it coincidences that people speak up on certain issues and then they have raids within a week or 10 days of them speaking up on certain issues. For those of you who follow the legal profession, I hold a law degree. I acquired it recently. I am now LLB. My sort of education has been expanded. Okay, we'll come to that later. But again, it's a goal I had. I wanted to get a law degree because I think it helps you understand so many things better. I understand my own contracts much better and find little lacuna that the clients, lawyers very cleverly hide within semantics. Of course, I still have a law firm go through it. What I'm trying to say here is that for those of you who followed the Supreme Court upholding of the Enforcement Directorate's powers, whether or not you feel you'll ever come under the scanner of the ED, whether or not you are playing in a field which can potentially attract EOW, whether or not you may be indulging in money laundering and therefore coming under the ambit of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. The wording of the act, the sweeping powers the ED has been given, potentially, you're now effectively guilty till proven innocent. There's something called the reverse burden of proof in law, the fundamental on which we are operating. And again, it's a bit of a long-winded answer to your question. The premise of law is that the burden of proof rests on the accuser. So if you are accusing me of something, it's your job as the prosecutor, or if it's a civil matter, as the petitioner, to provide adequate evidence to show that I have done what I have done. Except in women matters. Now, again, it could be argued that law should be gender neutral, but given the gender-based persecution we've seen for centuries and centuries and centuries, the law in India unequivocally favors women, which is why smart women, advised by smarter lawyers, find ways to misuse the law as well. But law is always made for the greater good. So people talk about how, Section 498 is misused, 377, 375, 376 is misused. Of course it's misused, but for every one case of misuse, there are probably a 1,000 unreported cases that would benefit if they had recourse to law. So if a woman accuses you of a crime, you have to prove that you didn't do it, because the burden of proof is reversed. And without getting into the merits and demerits of it, it's an exception. In the enforcement directorate matters, the entire burden of proof is on you to prove what is being considered to be proceeds of crime is not, in fact, procured as a result of proceeds of crime. Now, this may sound like something will never get to you. But when powers are given in this manner, and the sweeping nature of powers given, it's only a matter of time before it's misused.
Fantastic.
Which is what people fear. And that is really the answer. An income tax raid doesn't take you to jail. An enforcement directorate raid with powers to search, seize, arrest, and not share a copy of the ECIR, which is the equivalent of an FIR. So you don't even know what to defend against. So tomorrow, if you are arrested because you for whatever reason, I, as your lawyer, will not have a copy of your ECIR till you're produced in front of the magistrate. So how do I prepare your defense? Sure. So what I'm coming at is the weaponry that the state has at its disposal. And when I say state, I don't mean the state of Maharashtra, Delhi, Punjab. I mean the state as a entity, to use its coercive power. And that is, the state has monopoly over the use of coercive power, is what they teach you in political science, and rightly so. When that monopoly on coercive power has the potential to be used to silence people, people are very, very afraid. And probably that explains why not many people speak up, and those that do have started speaking less. Longer answer, but...
So I appreciate that in-depth answer, and I'm quite fascinated or excited about the fact that I could actually trigger the activist in you for that brief moment. You were in flow, and I'm trying to think, how many people can actually have someone who comes in the beauty world who can speak with such authority on a fairly serious subject. But I'm also staying conscious.
It doesn't take a lot. You should see my law school classmates. It doesn't take a lot to get a law degree in India, to be honest.
Yeah, but also staying conscious of the fact that, like I said, we live in a divided polity, and, this is not where this conference was designed. It's more about the fact. But having said with just two observations, and I want your reaction on one, is that increasingly the world, social media has made the world more democratized.
Absolutely.
Right? So a couple of decades back, we wouldn't be able to have our say about, what the US president is doing right or wrong, what the prime minister is doing right or wrong. Right now, we all get onto social media and say our piece, and if we've got our followers, we can trigger a whole new world in that count. To what extent do you think social media is a minefield, right? There are brands that today involve influencers. They use social media. Every one of the agencies here works with brands that spend a lot of money building up influencer farms, having micro-influencers, major influencers, celebrity influencers. They do a lot of social media. But deep down within every business, and I've been on that side, is the fear that social media can fire anyway, right? You don't control the narrative. When I began my career in the early 90s, as a brand, you had a point of view from Pepsi and you put out a big campaign saying, yeah, yeah, right choice, and the whole country resonated. But today, for every line you put out, there are two that come back. And it could be a small kid somewhere in Coimbatore who's saying something smarter, and before you know, that's trending, and your line is check my fizz. But that's another day. That's a story for another day. So I think my quick question to you, Gul, is how do you navigate this minefield of social media personally? And what is the advice that you have for all our corporate communication gurus out here?
I don't think I have the authority to be able to dish out advice, frankly. I think the collective experience and knowledge of this room of people probably exceeds those of many, many, many rooms like this, and my compliments to Praxis to put together such an incredible bunch of people from the PR world. I think social media is becoming a necessary evil for most brands to have. How do you navigate it in an extremely volatile environment where things can go from here to there in a jiffy? So I think the simplest way to do this is to take a step back. Always examine what is your brand proposition, what do you stand for, who is your TG. And once you do that, I think the narrative that you need to craft begins to emerge. The tricky thing is when there is a wave or there's a trend that you want to ride over, or for example, there is something that's being done that everybody is doing, usually pushed by the dispensation that, oh, now we're pushing patriotism. Now we're pushing sacrifice. Now we are pushing mother's love. Now we are pushing our women and how safe and secure we want to make them. The tricky part with riding one of those waves and jumping on to the bandwagon of a engineered, and it is engineered. Let there be no doubt about the fact that anything that's put out there is engineered socially. The tricky thing as a brand to be part of a socially engineered wave is that if you are not clear about where you stand morally, ethically, and from your own brand proposition, it can sort of just turn into a tsunami which you get swept under. So I feel every time when there is a trend, one should just take a beat rather than because today PR agencies work so closely with social media and digital agencies who in turn work very closely with the marketing agency of the brand. I think that the need to jump onto a trend is so pervasive that we don't think about whether we need to do that or not. I'll give you an example of Rakhi, which is coming up next week. Every brand is jumping onto Rakhi. Clothing brands are like, your Rakhi outfit. So, I just made my own Rakhis this time. I'm like, to hell with whatever you guys are doing. I bought thread, and I've spent the last 4 or 5 days making a bunch of Rakhis. The most complex one is my brother's, which I will tie tonight because he leaves for the US. And that's why, I'll probably go see him and tie his Rakhi. But my point is, there's also blowback. I'm not saying everybody's going to be like me and go crazy and buy thread and start making Rakhis and spend, something like 30 man-hours, woman hours making it. That's pretty much how much each Rakhi has taken me to make, about 3 to 4 hours. But my point is, it is a wave or a socially engineered trend that we're trying to ride. Another example I'd like to make is when that falls flat, is when your substance and what you stand for is probably not in tandem with the socially engineered wave you're trying to ride. There was a recent film helmed by a top star, produced by a massive production company, debuting a beauty queen recently. Does anybody remember the front page ads they ran with? a departure from what the film really stood for. I mean, they were trying to ride a particular socially engineered wave which is being ridden today by the dispensation, by some people who may support the dispensation, and being opposed by those who oppose the dispensation for the sake of opposing the dispensation. So whenever there's a dispensation, there'll be its supporters, there'll be those who are against it, and there'll be those who are against it for the sake of being against it. It's in every dispensation, in the previous dispensation and the one before that. And let there be no doubt, when this dispensation changes, and it certainly will, there will still be people who will oppose the people that you have helped bring in. So that's the nature of conversation and dialogue. Now this particular film turns out tanked. Like tanked, and how? Because of the messaging. And that, to me, is a case in point as to the communication going so badly wrong. If the film was pitched as what it was, historical drama, king, fight, you know, and sets and beautiful music and costumes and all of that, I think people would have been probably less critical and more forgiving. But you're trying to ride a particular wave. The last 3-day front page ads across all newspapers in the countries are about trying to ride a wave, which doesn't necessarily tie in with what your subject matter is. So you sort of end up with a colossal failure. So I think, to summarize my point of view, it is a minefield, and you will constantly be asked to change who you are to keep up with trends. I want to digress for 1 second, Lloyd, and talk about a very interesting conversation I had with somebody who works with, wait for it, Instagram partners. So I had an outreach from Instagram, and they said, you know, we would like to help you grow your Instagram. I said, that's wonderful, tell me. So can you make a reel a day, and can you cut back on posts, because, you know, the audience really wants more video. And I'm like, that's because you've tweaked the algorithm to be like TikTok. No. The audience wants more video, so we want to push reels more, and we would like for you to make more reels if you want your page to grow. And if it, if you put posts, then it won't grow. And just limit your post to about one post, static post, to one post a day, one post a week. And make sure you put out a reel a day minimum. So my counter to that was, I do have other things to do besides being on Instagram. No, I understand you have other things to do besides being on Instagram. But this is how the platform now is, and this is how the algorithm is. And the more reels you'll make, the more on top of the algorithm you'll come. And I was like, it possibly can work. And here lies a really important insight. It probably works for people whose full-time job it is to be social media influencers. And it's not a bad thing. I have immense respect for people who can churn out content like that. And it probably works for them because that is who they are. That is their business model. Now, would it necessarily work for me? People see me as X, Y, Z person. If I just start making mindless reels in order to gel with the algorithm, I will completely lose my unique brand proposition. Now, the trick is, and when you say it's a minefield, what is social media? Social media is a tool to communicate what your brand proposition is, as an individual, as a brand. And how can you use social media to communicate that in the most effective way, rather than becoming a tool of the tool? I can't become a tool of social media. I can't become a tool of Instagram. I can't become a tool of Twitter, because that is what's being said. Our good friend Anand Ranganathan, how many people remember him from good old Twitter? Good, cool guy. But I can't tweet like him. That's what it takes to get 3,000, 4,000 RTs today. That's not who I am. Maybe that's not who he is. But it's working. Maybe that is who he is, which is great because he's being authentic. So, all of us go back to social media early days, 2009, 2010. Now, my point is, if I can't be that, then I have to take a step back and find what can I be there. If the medium has changed, for better or worse, it's been made to change, it's been socially engineered to change, I can't change myself to ride that new wave of the medium. I must figure out how I can use that medium effectively to continue to communicate the most authentic version of me, the most ethical and authentic manner in which I can put myself forward. Similarly, when it comes to Instagram, it is a tool for me to communicate what I do. Things I'm passionate about, things I love doing, things I'm inspired to do. And in the process, sometimes accidentally you inspire other people. And that's a great place. I was struggling with some inspiration a couple of months ago, Lloyd. And, I just felt like I was drifting, I didn't have a goal. And then I just appropriated other people's goals. So my father and my husband had a plan to cycle to Ladakh. And I was going to be like this person going with a cap and drive my SUV and, just give them support. And I just realized that if they can do it, I can do it, which is a big trigger for me to do many things that I do. So the law thing came. My brother is a very successful lawyer. If he can do it, why can't I? If my dad and my husband can cycle, my father at 74, my husband at 49, why can't I? So sometimes helping appropriate other people's goals also helps. It's not like you're always going to have your own goal. And for me, that became something that drove the last 3 months in terms of training, in terms of focus. And, talking about inspiration, I got so much love and affection from people who said, I'm really inspired to do this. So, to conclude this minefield question, because it was a minefield and there is no easy answer, Lloyd. Social media is a tool and we should never forget that. It is a tool to communicate. It is a tool to put forth who you are, to put forth your brand proposition, to put forth the brand promise that you hold. You can't let that dictate who you are. I can't let Instagram dictate the person that I am. I can only use Instagram to showcase, because everything is show business today. Even if you're not in show business, you're in show business. To showcase who I am. And I must figure out what are the most effective tools for me to use the tools. I can't become a tool in the process.
So that was a masterclass in social media right here, folks. And, to paraphrase you, Gul, I think, a small edit of this is the kind that would work perfectly well on social media.
Only I could edit it and speak it in 3 lines.
One more skill. It's also a great segue to bring in the fact that you so seamlessly straddle your passions with, moments in your life, right? I've read about the fact that Gul's a biker, and guess how she got married, right? On bikes. I think it's a nice way to straddle that. And I think that leads me on to the segue, which is that you always had this activist in you. You want to go out and get things right and, do better for society and improve things. And you put your money where your mouth is, right? So in 2014, this beautiful young lady stood for elections in the city we are in Chandigarh, and did remarkably well. So this is 2014, Kiran Kher was the MP. She won with 100,000 votes. She also got more than 100,000, so they were both within the same ambit. And, somebody wins and somebody loses, and that's the way democracy works. Do you still believe that there is a bit of the politician in you, and would you, going forward, there's a whole whole lifetime ahead, would you want to take one more foray? And, and the city where we are in, and the state which was adjacent, has got the party that you were with, Aam Aadmi Party. So, any second thoughts? Any?
Absolutely, and I would do it again, and I will do it again. And I want to just go back to there was a talk I was giving for a brand D&I engagement, and they asked me, "How do you deal with your failures?" I'm like, "Which failure? You lost I just lost the election." In my head, I didn't see it as a failure, because the day counting began. So, you keep people who are not aware of how the system works, keep saying, "Oh, will you be able to save your deposit? Will you be able to save your deposit?" Do you know how much it takes to save your deposit? I forget now. You have to poll more than 16% of total votes polled. That's not a small number. Can someone Google it for me? Is it 16% or is it 20%? Amit, Twitter. It's not a small number. 1/6.
1/6.
So, wha-
So 1/6 of the winners.
1/6. It's not a small number at all. And at one point, when somebody would be like, oh, she's going to lose her deposit, she's going to lose her deposit. There were only about 6 or 7 or 8 candidates from the entire plethora of candidates that the Aam Aadmi Party fielded that didn't lose their deposits. And what that equated to in Punjab, I know I'm like a math student and everything, but can someone just tell me 450,000 total votes, registered voters in Punjab, what would be 1/6? 80,000. That's not a small number, right? So the city showed me a lot of love, and for me, I was pretty taken aback that 1 lakh, 8, 9 or 10,000, I forget the exact number, people actually voted for me out of 4 lakh, 4 something lakh eligible voters. One. And that's where I met Amit for the first time. He became an in-person friend from having been a Twitter friend. So I have a lot of friends who are saved on my phone as Twitter. So there's Twitter Amit, there's Twitter Amit PR at the end of it, and there's Amit Nanchal. So I have a lot of people, Twitter Madhavan as well. So if I pull out Twitter, I'll have all these names saved from Twitter, because that is when friendships converted from Twitter into the real world. Now, speaking at this conference in Hyderabad, there was a similar fireside chat, and I was like, what failure? Because in my head, of course, it was a loss, and I lost the election. 1, I was 35. 2, I had managed to win a significant number of votes. And 3, which is something, Nitin Pai. How many of you know Nitin Pai? Again, old Twitter. Nitin Pai told me, Gul, your brand has grown. So I was like, it has. More people knew me. I became the woman who rides the motorcycle. I was driving to Lucknow, and I stopped at a dhaba to have a cup of tea. And he's like, aap wo bullet wali hai na? But that man would never have known me. So for me, the way I view failure is conditioned by finding the best out of it. Would I fight another election? Absolutely. My son is only 4, so 2019 was out of the question. I think he just started school, so Punjab was also actually out of the question. But it also brings me to talk about something very honestly on a forum like this. You don't always agree with what everybody you support does. How do you retain the independence to take a step back and not necessarily become and I have lots of friends across lots of political affiliation. Let me put it simply, I have a lot of friends in every party. And so many of them privately disagree with what their parties are doing. The challenge for people who want to be in politics is twofold. One, how do you retain your independence? And take the option of stepping back when you disagree with what perhaps your party for the time being could be doing. How does the party react to you stepping back and not standing by them? Is the answer going and doing a parallel press conference and sort of dissing your party? No, that's not the answer. What is the way you do it? I mean, my way of doing it is I just take a slight step back. But how do you take a step back when you've been given the responsibility, and this is for other people, of course. How do you take a step back when you've been given the responsibility of being the communicator? So that's a tricky place a lot of people find themselves in, where they are proponents and supporters of a particular political party. They find themselves disagreeing, but they're just forced to say what they're forced to say. So the need to have independence of who you are, regardless of which political party you are in, is very important. It's very, very hard. Trust me. I know it from experience. It's very hard. The second thing you need to be able to be in politics is to have a revenue stream of your own. Very often people ask, what are you doing? And why would you not like to be in politics full-time? Of course, I would like to be in politics full-time, but I will once revenue streams are set, so that I'm not in a position where I become weak when I need something and somebody is willing to oblige me. I don't know of many politicians today who whose sources of income when they are not being paid their office's salary, whether they're an MP or an MLA or a councillor. If that is not there, how would they support themselves? And this is a question educated people also don't want to ask. Unless and until we welcome professionals into political parties who have day jobs, who give up those day jobs once elected, because once elected you have a house, you have transportation and a salary. Until then, how are you expected to support yourself? There's so many full-time politicians that I have no idea how they run their homes, or how they put fuel in their vehicles, or how they send their kids to schools, to the schools they send their kids to. And this is an important change we need to bring about. I think one of the people I admire very, very much is Mr. Nitin Gadkari. He speaks about this. And whenever I meet him, you know, I always go up to him and tell him that you're the only person in recent times who says you must be financially independent before you step into politics. Because if you're not, the rest is history.
Thanks, that's interesting. It's good to know that the activist and the politician at you is still alive. And,
alive and kicking.
And fantastic. So that's great. And yeah, I'm sure India and Chandigarh and, well, awaits the next steps on this one. But interesting point you made about financial independence in the context of politics, and you know, which is why also India has this peculiarity where, well, we have practicing MPs advertising water filters and running cricket commentaries, but like I said, we'll be digressing out of what we're here for. A key question, Gul, through this very successful career and, you know, multifaceted achievements and your new business venture, how you handle disappointments, right? Things, obviously, you may have faced disappointments. Election is just one of them, but things sometimes don't go the way they do. Or if I could contrast it with what you just spoke about in the context of social media being a minefield, is that there is this ultra-sensitive political correctness culture that's pervading our lives. And you've been outspoken. You speak your mind and you don't let it hold you. So do you, A, find that to be a hindrance? And how do you overcome failure or times when you get hit in the chin for speaking your mind?
Political correctness of today is different from the political correctness of, say, the previous dispensation. And regardless of whether you're a supporter of the dispensation or an opponent, there are no two ways about the fact that there will be a political correctness that the previous regime had and a political correctness that this regime had. Every regime will bring with it its expectations in terms of what they consider politically correct. So let's be very clear, this is not something that this dispensation has brought. The previous dispensation also had their own version of political correctness, so let's not insulate the previous people from political correctness and only put the entire blame at the door of this.
Yeah, but if I may, just to contrast it, and not because we're veering to go to the other side, my point is also about the fact that young people, with this woke culture, are so ultra-sensitive. I mean, just to get to what I'm thinking about is that I'm still old-fashioned. I subscribe to 5 newspapers. And I have this 8-year-old next door who once walked in and said, aren't you, Lloyd, you're like killing 8 trees a day. So, okay, guilt. And then 2 days in, she walked in and said, can I borrow some papers because I've got my friend's birthday party, I need to pack gifts. So contradiction hit me in the face. But my point is that there is a generation growing up that are so sensitive about things, and very often not even welcoming an opposing point of view. And you hold your points of view up there and firm. So does that kind of come in the way of your goals, your life, your success, your achievements?
I think you just have to find a way to put forth your points of view respectfully and in a manner which takes into account both sides of the story. And that's where the trick really lies. You take a position which appears to be, say, favoring X, and really today every position is favoring X or favoring Y. The ability to be able to discern and call a spade while also say that the spade's danda is made from wood that was chopped. Now, that is an art that must be cultivated. You have to be able to speak up always and say what you want to say, but make sure it's balanced. And therein lies really the fine art of being able to say what you want to say in these times, provided you are balanced. I can disagree with my my friends on the right wing. I can sometimes disagree with my friends on the left wing because I don't see myself as a right winger or a left winger. My views on national security, my views on territorial integrity are pretty much the same as any right-wing person's would be. However, my views on social liberty, on civil rights, are rather different. Hello, Shekhar. How are you? My views on libertarian issues could be considered liberal. But I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all space that says, oh, she's a right-winger, or she's a left-winger. Because when you articulate your position that you consider to be balanced, it doesn't, I mean, there is no litmus test of balance. When you articulate your position that you consider to be balanced, you will be hated by both the left and the right at the same time for that position. And that's fine. So, I mean, that's really it. And to answer the second part of your question, disappointment, you know, I think it's inevitable. But you've just got to do your OODA cycle in that moment. When an outcome takes place that's not desirable, you observe, orient, decide, and act. Of course, you feel bad for a little while, but as Rudyard Kipling says, you know, you have to cultivate the feeling of meeting with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters. That's the same. That's what we're all working towards. That is nirvana. That is why we're on earth. That is our journey. We need to work towards doing that.
Absolutely. That's great. Just one last question, and I shot out a little thing with a lot of the communication folks in the room and also outside on Twitter, and a couple of interesting questions. One from Deepa Day, who's from Hindustan Unilever, and she said, what do you think is the one thing that comes in the way of authenticity in communication? Why is it that brands and people very often stray out of what they stand for, right? That times people do things that is not quite XYZ. Why do they do what they do?
They have a mirror now and a Times now. So they're doing their own act of balancing. Literally, I mean, everything is balance. And it's always been like that. We'd be foolish if we thought that there was no balancing act earlier. Today, social media is a force multiplier, is a catalyst, is an aggregator of angst, and which can be channeled to cause personal harm, including but not limited to bodily harm. I mean, with all due respect, I think the kind of threats that Nupur Sharma is facing do not belong in any society that calls itself a democracy and a functioning democracy. Now, my friends on the left side would not like me saying this. But here I am saying this because what is right must be called out. What is wrong must also be called out. Having said that, I still don't think it's right to go after Kanika Kohli, is that her name? The writer of Raksha Bandhan? Or Lal Singh Chadda. I mean, for the very reason that you can't call for violence to Nupur, you cannot, I mean, I'm not equating violence in somebody's movie at the same time. Let me clarify that very clearly. There are different kinds of wrongs and there are different degrees of wrongs, but the political correctness that is required to operate in this environment needs a degree of balance, which is why our friends in the Times of India group have Times Now and Mirror Now.
Okay. So great. I think that's a pretty even question. And there's one more interesting one that came from Balaji Krishnaswamy. I don't know if he's in the room, from Amazon. And his point was, in that transition from, a secure army life and many schools that you went to, and the first few years in Bollywood, was that like a big culture shock? Did it hit you for the first 4 or 5 years when you made the move to Mumbai?
It didn't, actually, because I was very secure in who I was. And, yesterday I was in conversation with Deepti Naval for her book. And, what she said is all the validation I've ever needed, if I've ever needed some. She said that she pursued every interest of hers, creative writing, poetry, art, photography, along with her acting career. And today at 70, she is a force to reckon with because of how multi-dimensional she is. It was her book release about her childhood spent in Amritsar. And what she said was so interesting. She said, if I wanted to go and take pictures in Lahore back in the 80s, I would just take off and go. If I wasn't shooting for the next few weeks, I would just go. I wouldn't wait for a film offer to come my way and keep waiting. I would continue living my life. And that's pretty much coincidentally, I found out because, I mean, while I've worked with her, I've known her, we've never had this particular conversation. I've pursued my interests along with whatever else I've done. And I don't think they're mutually exclusive. You do not need to stop being who you are to pursue, say, your interests in trekking, adventure travel, cycling, whatever it is that you like doing. And if someone like her could do this 20 years before me, 30 years before me, I have so much more at my disposal today thanks to the very same minefield-riddled social media that she never had access to. And today, for me to discover so late that she has so much to her. She did the frozen river trek in the 80s, the Chadar trek in Ladakh. And people are sort of thinking it's a fashionable thing to do now. It's just that she went ahead and did it, and she lived the person that she wanted to be, and she is the person she wanted to be. And that's the inspiration that we all should draw. You can continue to be everything that you are while continuing to pursue your interests. You mustn't let your job get in the way of living your life, because every additional year lived is 1 year less to live. And if you don't live your life to the fullest, you'll be sitting on your deathbed wondering, oh, I should have done this, but I didn't do it because I was waiting for XYZ.
What a perfect end that was, Gul. Such a pleasure. And I think the key takeaways, not that I need to summarize, I think one was really the fact that stay authentic, be who you are. Whether you're a brand, whether you're a business, whether you're a company, I think that's one. And I think two is, as you've rightly proved, pursue your dream. I mean, if you want it bad enough and you're willing to work hard for it, you go get it. So I think that's great. I could spend the rest of the evening speaking to you, but thank you so much. Really enjoyed this. And just a small little bit for Amit and the Praxis team. I think I love the fact that, 9 years, this is my first Praxis. They've never repeated a city. But I think the other interesting thing is they always get the most famous sons and daughters of the city or that state all together, right? So yesterday was Abhinav Bindra, who unfortunately couldn't make it because he's down with COVID. And then I think we heard Atul Sharma speak, who's the president of the public PRCAI, who's also born in Chandigarh. And now we have the other two famed sons of the soil. So Gul, yourself, and our next speaker, I can see Shekhar beaming up there. I know that he's got deep roots in the city, as much as people may put him into the Lutyens world. I think this is the place where he blooms the best. So we're looking forward to his session. But thank you, Gul. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Lloyd, if we can just stand together for a photograph. Thank you, Gul. I never got a chance to introduce Lloyd properly. He was the head of marketing for Hewlett-Packard Asia, earlier senior marketing roles in Motorola and in PepsiCo. Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you, Gul.